Hello everyone, welcome back to this channel, and today we are starting with part 2 of ISC History Chapter 1. Today we are starting with the August offer of 1940. Starting with, if you have remembered or if you have revised, then you remember that Viceroy Lord Linlithgow had taken the Indians for the World War II while not considering the Congress government or the Congress politicians. As a result, they felt disrespected and they resigned from their posts. So, due to this, also, the Muslim League was very happy and they celebrated the Day of Deliverance. So, this was the quick recap of what happened earlier, and we are starting with the August offer today. The reply of the government, the British government, came through the Viceroy Lord Linlithgow on August 8, 1940. The Congress proposal for provisional national government was turned down. The Viceroy's suggestion were Dominion status. Now, what do we mean by provisional national government? So, this means complete freedom to govern. As we have already learned about complete independence or Swaraj, this provisional national government also means complete freedom to govern. While Indians wanted this, Viceroy Linlithgow in the August offer of 1940 suggested dominion status. Now, what does dominion status mean? Remember, what we wanted is complete independence, but what we are getting is dominion status. Now, in this state, what happens is that certain important categories or important portfolios of the government, such as the defense, the foreign affairs, and certain other portfolios of the government will be looked after by the British, and we will have certain parts of the government like the Home Ministry. So the major and the important parts like defense, then foreign ministry, all of this will be ruled or looked after by the British government. So on paper, so dominion status means although on paper we are given the independence, but we are not able to uh, practice that in full force. So dominion status would be granted to India after the end of the war. So first of all, you are giving us dominion status, not complete independence, that too after the end of the war. And what will happen after that? There is no idea, no assurance, no promise. Next, a constituent assembly would be summoned to draft a new constitution. Now, as we have known earlier that there was during this time the Indians wanted to make a constituent assembly so that a new constitution could be made. As a result, the August offer suggested that okay, we'll give you a constituent assembly who will make the new constitution. The interests and rights of the Muslims would be safeguarded by the said constitution. Now, if you look into this particular part of the August offer, it clearly mentions the interests and rights of the Muslims. It does not just say minorities but the Muslims. So they are clearly supporting the Muslims one sidedly. The government would never agree to a constitution which did not enjoy support of the Muslim League and the other minorities. Now, right now they are telling Muslim League and other minorities, but here you see they have clearly mentioned to safeguard the Muslims. Anyways, moving on. Point 4 says few nominated Indian members would be included in the expanded Viceroy's Legislative Council. So the Viceroy he cannot look after everything by himself. So he will have a Legislative Council, and in that certain like very few handful of Indian members would be there. So mostly the Brits. A war advisory committee would be formed by inclusion of native rulers to aid and advise the government. Now, this War Advisory Committee would have native rulers. What do we mean by native rulers? Now, if you see, um, India as a whole was not ruled by the British itself, okay? For example, if you see, suppose let's consider this part of India was looked after, or looked after as in was ruled over by the British. But certain other parts, maybe this part was independently ruled by another ruler, maybe this another part too. So now these two would be considered as native rulers because they were under certain kings who were probably not completely independent rulers giving aids to the British government, but still they will be considered as native rulers. This August offer, as it came to be known, was rejected by the Congress on the following grounds. Now, as we know, this was not accepted by the Congress, so it was rejected. Now, why was it rejected? We'll come to know. We can actually like if we think ourselves that okay, why can the Congress reject, we already know the answers. You just need to analyze the points given, like what were the conditions of the August offer. If you read through, you will know. It's easy. There was no suggestion for provisional national government. I already said provisional national government means complete freedom to govern. And this was not given by the August offer. What they said is dominion status, but we don't need this. What we need is complete freedom. It encouraged the anti-Congress forces like Muslim League. Remember I said here it said the interests and rights of the Muslims would be safeguarded. So as a result, it was encouraging anti-Congress forces. Now, besides supporting the Muslim League, even they did not accept this August offer. Why? Because the Muslim League did not accept the offer as it didn't give a clear assurance for the establishment of Pakistan. So they were supporting the Muslims, but there was no clear words telling that you get Pakistan, the Muslims get Pakistan. So as a result, they also, since their demand wasn't fulfilled, they also said, fine, we don't accept your August offer. Okay, next. It became clear to Congress that the British government would not change or modify its policy. Ultimately, at Ramgarh Congress in May 1940, Gandhiji agreed to launch civil disobedience. But this would be individual satyagraha. Now, what is this? We'll get to know. By volunteers personally selected by Gandhiji for this purpose, they would offer anti war speeches only. Now, civil disobedience movement. Disobedience means if certain rules or laws are to be considered, you do not follow that. Now, individual satyagraha, as in like certain other movements that we have seen and we will see, in this case, it was not to be done by groups, it was individual satyagraha. For example, Acharya Vinoba Bhave was chosen by Gandhiji to participate in this civil disobedience movement. So he alone went and gave anti-war speeches to bring peace, for example. So this is individual satyagraha, wherein certain chosen people chosen by Gandhiji, they go and then give anti-war speeches. So it is done individually, not in a political party way or not in a form of groups. Okay. Prominent Congress leaders, including Nehru and Vallabhbhai, were arrested before they could offer satyagraha. The movement could not achieve much because of its limited nature, and the movement was ultimately withdrawn in December 1941. Now, out of the chosen members, I suppose Nehru, Vallabhbhai, and a lot more people were to be there. But unfortunately, they were arrested before they could do their part. As a result, it had to be withdrawn. Next. Let me change this color so that it looks pretty. Yeah. Arrival of Cripps mission. So we will see a number of suggestions or this kind of missions that actually came to India so that India could be convinced with certain points that you for negotiation, certain points of negotiation. For example, the Cripps mission, August offer, and then comes the cabinet mission plan, the Mountbatten plan. So finally, the Mountbatten one was considered, but before that, several others also came. So it's important to know what were the points that were suggested in those and why were they rejected. This is also very important to know. In the meantime, the war situation became very critical. After occupying Poland, Belgium, Holland, Norway, France, Germany, France, Germany attacked Russia on 22nd June 1941. Now, what happened is Japan had joined the Axis powers. So, after that, what Japan did is she became very aggressive and started capturing several places. And when we read World War II, you will know this is one of the biggest blunders done by Japan. That is, she suddenly attacked the American fleet in Pearl Harbor. So, as a follow up of this event, only the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki happened in Japan, but we will get into details in the Second World War chapter itself. But as of now, Japan started being very aggressive and attacked the American fleet in Pearl Harbor, captured several places like Philippines, Indochina, Indonesia, Malaya, etc. Burma, as in Myanmar. So, and march towards Assam. Now, this is very important, okay? You have to remember that India and Japan, they were not enemies. Now, they were not enemies by itself, but India was under the control of the Brits, okay? India was under the control of the Brits, and the Japan and British, they were enemies. So the fact that India was ruled by British, Japan had reasons to attack India. Basically, Japan and India were not enemies. There was no reason, certainly, that Japan would attack India. But the only fact that India was under the rule of the Brits, that Japan wanted to attack India, that was thought by the Indian rulers. Thus, they brought the war to India's doorstep. Why India's doorstep? Because Japan was coming all the way from Indonesia, Malaya, Burma towards Assam, so probably she could also attack Assam. The British army was facing defeat after defeat in the Southeast Asia. There were pressures on Britain from Russia, America, China to reconsider their Indian policy so that Indians could cooperate with the British against Japan's attack. The British government was now in a desperate condition for seeking the cooperation of India. Why cooperation of India in the war effort? Because India could provide them with what they wanted, that is, people, that is, the manpower, because they needed a better force to fight the war, and India could supposedly give them that. Hence, they were seeking cooperation, okay? The government decided to send Sir Stafford Cripps, this man, Sir Stafford Cripps, a member of the war cabinet, to India after the fall of Rangoon to Japanese. Cripps came to India on 22nd March 1942 and started discussion with the representatives of Congress, Muslim League, Hindu Mahasabha, the Harijans, the native rulers, and the liberals. So, what he did is he spoke to every class, every form, and every politically grouped people. Now, if you do not know what Harijans are, you must have heard about the untouchables or allegedly the lower or supposedly the lower caste people. So they were called Harijans as a form of respect so that they do not feel disrespected by all those terms like untouchables or all of the things that were happening to them. So this is a form of respect that they were considered Harijans. So Stafford Cripps actually spoke with all these kinds of people just in order to negotiate and seek cooperation from the Indians. Now moving on to the proposals of the Cripps mission. Now, I will tell you, when you read the chapter, when you read the certain proposals of a particular mission, when you look at the proposals, no, you keep in mind that okay, this point I am reading, probably this could be a cause of rejection. Why will this be a rejection? Because this is there. You need to keep in mind, and then it will be very easy for you to know why it was rejected or why could have they kept it. So you have to think when you study, not just blindly go on reading it, okay? First point, dominion status. Now, when I say dominion status, do you think it will be taken, it will be considered by the Indians? No. Always what we wanted is complete independence. So, wherever you say dominion status, it sorry, wherever you see dominion status, it is going to be a cause of rejection. So dominion status would be granted to India immediately after the end of the war, with the right to secede from the British Commonwealth after the end of the war. Now, this is a key word, key phrase, because when the war is going to end, we have no idea. And they are not giving us complete independence but dominion status. That too after the end of the war. So, this is basically when it is going to happen, we have no idea. Moreover, this will happen or not, there is no proof to that. Next, immediately after the war, a constitution making body would be set up. It would consist of members from British India as well as native states. Only this Constituent Assembly's point was one of the points that could be considered by India, but why? We need complete independence and not dominion status. So, if you look at this point number 2, it says British India as well as native states. So, what do we mean by this? Same thing I already explained. Suppose this is India. This part of the India, for example, is ruled by the British. So, this is going to be the British India. Suppose this part is ruled by a ruler, a king, this also. Then these two parts will be considered as native states. Third, the constitution so framed after the war would be adopted by the British government on condition that any Indian province, if desired, could remain outside Indian Union and negotiate directly with the British government. Now here we saw an important term, that was right to secede or right to secede, however you would like to pronounce it. This particular point. Now, what does this say? For example, India was a group, a union of certain princely states. Now, when you have the right to secede, what happens is that the princely states, they could choose any of the Indian provinces, they could choose to either remain with India, remain outside India, or even negotiate directly with the British government. So it was up to them what they could do. So basically, before giving independence, it was another prominent effort by the British to break India. As simple. They were telling that the Indian provinces, they could choose to remain with India, go out of India, or directly negotiate with the British government. The actual control, here's the important point, the actual control of defense and military operations during the war period would be retained by British government. So this is what is the essence of dominion status. You are giving independence for the namesake, and all the important portfolios like defense, finance, international relations, foreign policies will be taken by them. So these were the proposals. Now, if you think of what could be the point of rejection, of course, right to secede would be the point of rejection. Of course, dominion status would be the point of rejection. Okay. Reactions of the Congress and other political parties. The Congress rejected the proposals. Very naturally. Why? Congress demanded full independence, but what we were given is dominion status. We do not need dominion status, full independence. But Cripps now offered dominion status, which Congress had already rejected in 1930. Like, you are asking for dominion status now, Congress rejected in back in 1930. Now, secondly, the plan involved partition of the country. Why partition of the country? Because the right to secede, if certain groups of princely states choose to be independent or remain outside the Union of India, that basically is partition. We don't want that. The proposal wanted to create a cleavage by providing that any province could opt out of Indian federal constitution. And it was, I repeat, very important you remember this, it was an indirect indication towards the formation of Pakistan, because besides any other princely states, it was very obvious that Pakistan could be formed due to this particular condition given laid down by the Cripps mission. It was an indirect indication towards the formation of Pakistan. Now, if you will ask that, okay, eventually Pakistan was formed, so why couldn't they just accept this offer? For example, if you have a doubt, you see later on after the Mountbatten plan, when the partition was actually accepted, it was due to several reasons, unavoidable reasons, where it had to happen. They were compelled to make partition happen. But in this situation, they have an option to reject the offer, get a better offer. Hence, they could reject it. Thirdly, the Indian native states were also given right to secede from Indian Union. Even, and that's what the native states, even they could choose to stay independent. For example, what happened with the Nizam of Hyderabad with Kashmir. Eventually, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel made the Nizam of Hyderabad join India, but initially they didn't want to. So that was the problem. Fourthly, the Congress proposal for forming a war council with Indian leaders was denied. Now, there was a mention of war council earlier, but Indian leaders was not included. It would be the Brits who would be under that. Fifthly, all proposals were to be implemented in future. So Congress did not rely on a future promise. Gandhiji condemned the proposal as a post-dated check on a crashing bank. So if you see this, immediately after the end of the war, so when war will end and what is the time period that refers to immediately after? For example, if war ended yesterday, will the independence be given today, or will they take another month or another year or a decade long? So there was, the promise wasn't a complete one, like we don't know when they would give us. So it was like a post dated check on a crashing bank. Remember this is what Gandhiji referred to this plan as. Now, surprisingly, why I say, because although there was an indirect indication towards the formation of India, the Muslim League also rejected this. Why? Because this did not ensure Pakistan. That is, there was an indirect indication, but there was no assurance. Next point, 50-50 seats for the Muslim League with the Congress in the interim government. Now, the Muslim League also asked for the transfer of power, interim government will be formed. So, you give us 50-50 seats, which was not given. Now, what do we mean by interim government? For example, when India was given independence, there was there was no properly formed government of India. For example, India is a democracy, so there was supposed to be an election happening. After that, certain ministers would be chosen, the cabinet would be chosen, who would be the finance minister, who would be the defense minister, all of this. But there was no election because independence wasn't there. So interim government is a form of government where they are chosen for the time period only. They are tentative. So they will take the power. During the transfer of power, they will make this happen, and once the independence comes to force, comes to action, new election would be formed. So until the official government is formed, the interim government takes part as the tentative one. They will look after the country, the government, for the time being, for the time while. Moreover, the declaration had not recognized separate electorates in the constitution making body. So they even demanded for separate electorates too. Even that was not given. Moreover, the Sikhs, the depressed classes, the Indian Christians, and the Anglo Indians demanded more safeguard to their communities. But there was no uh, no points laid down by the Cripps Mission to that this Sikh, the depressed classes, the Indian Christians, they would be given more safeguards. So they were almost like neglected. So did they also rejected the Cripps Mission? So it failed to pacify the Indians. But in spite of that, the British government, through Cripps Mission for the first time, agreed that Indians should frame their own constitution. Now we are all about finding light in the darkness, being optimistic even when everything around us is so pessimistic. So that is what it says. In spite of all of these bad points laid down by them that will give you dominion status and not complete independence and all of that, the only good thing that happened was they agreed for the first time that Indians should be given to frame their own constitution. Okay, so we are done with some of the plans right here. We are at closely to a 30-minute mark, but I think I'll complete all of this and then end, because otherwise there will be too many parts. So Quit India movement. After the failure of the Cripps mission, it became clear that the British government was not willing to transfer power to Indian people. Now, British government was not willing to transfer power. How? Because they were not following what Indians demanded for, or what the Congress demanded. The failure of the Cripps mission further sharpened Congress hostility towards British, because they were giving all of those points like dominion status, and becoming they were refusing to everything that the Congress was asking for. The arrival of Japan to India's eastern frontier aroused among the Congress mixed feeling of fear and hope. Why mixed feeling of fear and hope? Because the arrival of Japan could mean attack on India, which refers to fear, and also the fact that if Japan would win over the British, then they would get independence. So it was a mixture of hope and fear. There was apprehensions that India might meet the fate of Malaya and Burma, and Japan would be the new imperialist. Nehru's anti British attitude did not condemn Japan's aggression. Underneath the fear was the hope that Japan might liberate India from the British. Now, why was this hope? There was a hope that Japan might help. How did the hope come from? We'll get to know. This was partly born of hostility towards the British and partly of the assurance given by General Tojo, the Prime Minister of Japan. So we know this certainly, that the Indian leader, of course, Subhash Chandra Bose, he actually went to Japan for considerations and negotiations with the Japanese Prime Minister. So Tojo had proclaimed India for Indians. Subhash Chandra Bose had already escaped from India to Berlin in Japan 1941 and then to Tokyo and Singapore. He assured the Indians from the Azad Hind Radio, Germany 1942, that Japan had no designs on India. That is, I have already explained this to you earlier that India and Japan, they did not have any issue within themselves. There was no way why Japan had to attack India. The only point of hostility, or the only reason why Japan could certainly attack India, was because India was under the rule of the British. Otherwise, there was no reason. As a result, Subhash Chandra Bose from the Azad Hind Radio actually let the Indians know that do not worry, Japan is not going to attack you. And Azad Hind Radio, as in we have heard of the Azad Hind Fauj or the Indian National Army and the Forward Bloc, the party that was formed by Subhash Chandra Bose. And if you do not remember or know, do not worry, the very next segment of the chapter actually talks about INA and Forward Bloc. So we will surely do that in the part 3 of this chapter. Next, the presence of the British in India is an invitation to Japan to invade India. Their removal removes the bait. So this is what was considered by Gandhiji, by the Indian Congress, that the presence of British in India is an open invitation to Japan. Now there is another person, that is Raja Gopalachari. So all the Congress leaders accepted Gandhiji's viewpoint, but he actually wanted to accept Cribb's proposal and the principle of Pakistan. He did not agree with Gandhiji and tendered his resignation from Congress. Now, Raja Gopalachari actually said that let's accept what is there in Cribb's mission, we will get independence. Let Pakistan be formed and we'll take it. But except for him, nobody agreed on this and they wanted to negotiate more. Now, you may think that okay, he was very he thought of the future, and what he thought actually came true, that is Pakistan was eventually formed, right? So we could have accepted the Crips mission only. Why did we wait until Mountbatten plan? Now, although this sounds right, but it wasn't, because the Crips mission did not promise complete independence. Again, the problem was between complete independence and dominion status. If we would accept the Crips mission, we would get dominion status besides Pakistan being formed. The fact that we chose the Mountbatten plan later on, what we got is complete independence. So that is one of the plus points. Spread of the movement is probably not part of your syllabus. Look into that, and if you feel I need to explain, please let me know in the comments. And this is actually quite easy, you can read through. That's a story like you will understand. Now, causes of the failure of the movement. This is supposed to be quit. If you join the Telegram group, I will attach a part of notes that I have from the Quit India movement. That is, what was it and why was the resolution passed. And I'll read from that, I'll explain you from that, and then we will come to causes of the failure, okay? So, Quit India movement. We are starting with Quit India movement. Quit India movement, 8th August 1942. The movement was the last mass movement of India's freedom struggle. Even though the movement lasted only for a few months, it rattled the foundations of the British rule in India. The Quit India resolution was introduced during the Wardha session of 14th of July. Now it's important to note this, during the Wardha session on 14th of July 1942. So it was passed and adopted. Actually, the Quit India resolution was introduced during the Wardha session on 14th of July 1942, but it was passed and adopted on the 8th of August. As a result, we always say Quit India movement from 8th August. It was adopted and passed on 8th August 1942 during the Bombay session. Now, another important point during the Bombay session. It was actually introduced in the Wardha session and it came into effect, it was adopted in the Bombay session. Now, this could come as a googly for your MCQs or short answers, so remember this. The resolution demanded for the immediate and unconditional departure of the British. It failed, however, to attain its objectives due to lack of leadership and brutal government suppression. Now, why due to lack of leadership and brutal government suppressions, that we will come to know in the later parts. I'll come to that. So, one thing through this was very clear that at the end of the movement, the days of British in India were numbered because this Quit India movement, being the last mass movement, had done immensely well to a certain extent. As a result, it made the British being left in India very numbered. So why was Quit India resolution passed? It was due to several reasons. For example, the failure of Cripps mission. Look, the policy of divide and rule was very evident in that, and Indians were against it. The Congress was against it. So failure was Cripps mission was one of the reasons. Threat of a Japanese invasion, communal crisis, economic crisis, and several other reasons. Course of the movement, you can read it by your own if you want to, the spread of it, and we will directly go on to cause of the failure of the movement. Let's change the color again. The historic Quit India movement failed due to some reasons. When Gandhiji and all other leaders were arrested, the movement came under the control of the local leaders. Now, during this, Gandhiji and several other big leaders were arrested and the local leaders had to take over. But it is important to remember that not all the local leaders were followers of true Gandhian ideas. So, as a result, the Gandhian principles were not particularly followed during this. They organized the movement locally and there was no centralized leadership. No centralized leadership because they were already arrested. And for a movement, if there is no centralized leadership, then the coordination and the guidance is missing. So naturally, the movement gradually became scattered and lost its force. Now, Dr. Rajendra Prasad gave his view, which according to me is very true. According to Dr. Rajendra Prasad, extensive preparation was needed for success of its movement. The leaders of the movement should have decided their plan of action before the government had arrested them. So the British always do is suppress whenever somebody goes against them. So what they had to do, what the leaders had to do is decide their plan of action even before government had arrested them. Now you may think that why will they plan everything before the government arrested them? Now that is what they had to understand and they had to consider that there are chances that the government could actually arrest them in order to suppress the movement. But what happened is they made no such preparations because Gandhiji was of an opinion that government would not arrest him. Now, why was this? I have no idea. But he thought that no, the government won't arrest me, so I can continue it impromptu. The Quit India movement also failed as the rulers of the native states, army, police, and high government officials remained faithful towards the British government. Now, it was a mass movement, so there was supposed to be a mass participation also, but rulers of the native states, the army, police, high government officials, they didn't take part. They abstained from it. As a result, also, it we failed through the Quit India movement. But I believe maybe also it was not their fault, certainly to very certain extent only, because maybe they were also suppressed by the government, they were also suppressed by rules and laws and punishments that could follow up. Although they did betray their own motherland, whatever, nonetheless. Thus, the activities of the government continued unhampered. The movement did not evoke much response from the merchant community because the capitalists and the merchant groups had profited heavily during the war period. How did the merchants and the capitalists earn lots of profit during this time? Um, During that war period, certain merchants who would actually have go downs and keep the ration, that is rice, lentils, oil, so they would have big go downs to store that. And during the war period, when there was shortage of food, they would release what they had in stock but in very high prices. So for example, if you had to pay 100 rupees for a quantity of rice during that period, the fact that there was blackouts and lots of shortage of food, you had to buy that same amount, same quantity of rice with 300 rupees. So you see the double and the lot of other profits they were making through this process. So the merchants and the capitalists actually earned a lot. As a result, they did not support the Quit India movement. Even the Muslim League remained aloof from the movement. Why the Muslim League remained aloof? Because it was arranged by Congress, and Congress is doing so, the Muslim League had to not take part in it. The Hindu Mahasabha just condemned the movement. The Communist Party, due to its People's War policy, they did not support the movement. Congress leaders like Raja Gopalachari, they did not participate but supported the war efforts. So, from the very beginning, actually, the movement was ill conceived and weak for all of these reasons. And the most important reason was that the ruthless repression of the authority. Now, the government had adopted all the methods of repression like arresting, detention, open firings, etc. The British government took advantage of the wartime press censorship to suppress the movement ruthlessly. So during the war, what is press censorship? Consider the radio, newspapers, and all the part of media and press. So they could print news about what was happening all around, and also via the radio let people know what is happening all around. But when press censorship comes to action, the media houses and the radio companies, they are barred from telling the whole truth or the actual information. Example, there is something that the newspaper agencies were about to print or the radio agencies were about to say that was against the British government. Now, due to censorship, they cannot do it. So the British would filter out all the negatives against them and then let the news come to the light. So also the wartime press censorship helped the British to make this movement a failure. Because India is a big nation, right? Out of the Quit India movement, what is happening in this place? If this place would not know via the news, how will they act accordingly and similarly? And the wartime press censorship was exactly not allowing this to happen. Okay. Um, in this one, we have understood a lot of things. So, if you feel that I need to explain some point more or you need a little more guidance, please let me know in the comments. Okay. Significance of the movement. We are at the very end of this unit, and soon we are going to finish this. Through the Quit India movement, though the Quit India movement collapsed, it clearly revealed strong determination of the Indian people to do away with the British rule. That means Quit India movement failed, but the spirit of the Indians very strong. That was shown. The British government had never faced such an opposition before. So big bash to their um, it was a big bash to them and a major opposition that they had never faced before. The decision of the British government in 1945 to try for a negotiated settlement of the transfer of power was the outcome of the Quit India movement. So this negotiated settlement of transfer of power, it came due to the Quit India movement. So although on paper the movement failed, but it actually made a lot of things happen. In a letter to Churchill dated 24th October 1944, Viceroy Wavell pointed out that it would be impossible to hold India by force after the war. It would in fact be wise to start negotiating before the end of the war. Why before the end of the war? Because after the war would end, what the result would be, they didn't know. And even if they won, the Indians were becoming suddenly, they were getting so much powerful that they had to leave. A point of time would come when the British had to leave. So what Viceroy Wavell suggested Churchill is that they start negotiating before that. The Quit India movement clearly demonstrated the fighting spirit of the people and their desperate longing for freedom. It revealed that the fear of the mighty British power had disappeared from the people's mind. The 1942 movement was the apex of Indian struggle for freedom. It became very clear that the British would have to leave India sooner or later. The only question was how and when. So this movement actually made sure that the British actually go away. When and where, that would be decided. Finally, the movement created a strong public opinion in the foreign countries. Now, public opinions in the foreign countries is very important. For example, nowadays, many nations focus on their soft power because that actually helps them to make better international relations. Okay, so this movement created strong public opinion in the foreign countries in favor of India. So, America, China, they were specially influenced by the tide of this revolution. The American President Roosevelt wrote to the Chinese Prime Minister that the best policy for the English would be to grant independence to the people of India as soon as possible. So here we end with this part 2 of chapter 1 ISC History class 12th, and in the upcoming sessions we will do with the next parts. Thank you. I hope you have loved this video. If you need more explanations or certain more details, please let me know. If you have any doubts, do let me know. Join the Telegram. Go to Telegram, search for ISC Made Easy, and you will get my channel, ISC Arts Made Easy. And join that. I'll provide with the notes, and the said part of the Quit India movement, I'll post it there. Thank you for watching till here. I hope I could help you.